Hello, Emmanuel family. I'm Jim Lott, and I'm standing at the entrance to our church, Emmanuel, in front of the window, which depicts the crucifixion and the resurrection and the ascension. And I'm standing here really still in celebration of Pentecost, which occurred, well, it occurred throughout the world, but it occurred here at Emmanuel, actually in person. And it was a very exciting moment. And I thought I'd take this occasion to reflect a little bit on what the church means and the histories that we all have of churches that we grew up in, and the history of Emmanuel, if we've lived through much of that. And actually, this is not my memory. It's a memory by Jane Siglo, who was rector of Emmanuel from 1992 to 1998. After Jane retired, she and her husband ran a winery in Ivy, and then after that they moved to Westminster Canterbury in Charlottesville, where they still live. In 2007, Jane published a book called Like Trees Walking, which is a reflection on aging and the spiritual life, and then a supplement to it in 2018 called Gracious Uncertainty, Faith in the Second Half of Life. And it's from this book that I want to read one of Jane's short reflections, with her permission. It's called Ringing Them Home. There was an old steeple bell in my home church. It was way up in the tower, and as a child I was quite curious about it. The sound had such power, such resonance, I could feel it in my belly. One Sunday the minister said I could go up with Warden Jones and ring the bell. Me? Ring the bell? Yes, he said, go on now, it's time. So Warden Jones and I climbed the wooden steps round and round and round until we reached the top of the tower, and there it was, a huge bell aged with patina. Mr. Jones handed me the rope and said I should ring it. I tried, tugged as hard as I could. It wouldn't move. But finally, with a little help from Mr. Jones, it began to swing out and back, and then, much to my delight, I was lifted up off my feet, ringing and swinging in the early morning sun. I could see people down below. They were unloading children from the car, helping grandfathers cross the street and chatting with friends. But as the sound of the bell grew louder, they began to hurry. A lady lost her hat. She had to pick it up off the street and run to catch up. I would have kept on ringing and swinging all day, but Mr. Jones said, that's enough. They're gathered now. And when I went back down the wooden steps, I saw that sure enough, the church was full. Everyone was in place, waiting to sing the opening hymn. Looking back on that Sunday morning, I realized that ringing the bell was my first effort at evangelism. I was summoning people to church. Hurry, this is where you'll hear good news. I had responded to the same summons for most of my life, primarily out of habit. We went to church on Sundays. We just did. The habit began to wear thin in my adulthood. Often the liturgy seemed dry and disembodied. Sermons didn't offer much in the way of spiritual protein, and the announcements were endless. So instead of confessing on bended knee and praising God with all my heart and soul and mind and strength, I'd drift away, think about the grocery list. Don't forget to buy more laundry soap. And there were times when I drifted away altogether. It was sort of nice. I could stay home on Sundays, sleep late, and maybe have a big breakfast of scrambled eggs and biscuits. But it's curious, because even as I drifted, I felt as if I were on a tether, like an astronaut floating above the surface of the earth, and eventually I'd feel a tug at my soul. Jane, you've gone far enough. It's time to come home. And I'd return, landing feet first on familiar ground. I don't drift that much anymore. It's probably due to wobbly knees and senile vertigo. But for whatever reason, wandering makes me nervous. I usually stick close to home. The choir is slightly less than perfect. The The speaker system is weak, so I may or may not hear the sermon, which may or may not be a good thing. And the announcements are still endless. But it's where I belong. And it seems foolish to expect the church to fit my expectations perfectly, so when I hear the bell, I hurry home. There are a lot of drifters who never hurry home. Some are angry because God's face seems set against them. Some are cynical. You churchy people are just interested in rules and creeds, all that institutional stuff. And some totally misunderstand what the church is all about. They hear the raging claims of soul-snatching Christians. If you don't come back to church when the Lord gathers up the souls of the faithful, you won't be with them. No wonder they stay away. For the longest time, I didn't worry about these people. It's their loss. You can keep on floating if that's what you like. But now that I worship in a half-empty church where prayers echo off the walls, I realize it's our loss as well. Without them, the community is not complete. It's like a jigsaw puzzle with the missing piece of the pale blue sky. And seeing the emptiness makes me want to climb up wooden steps and ring a steeple bell again. Come home. We need you. We need your energy, your voice. We need your crazy new ideas. I'll tell them how nice it is to have the fellowship of coffee hours and potluck suppers, to have friends who share the happy times, and how comforting it is to have them in times of crisis when your knees buckle under the weight of grief. But I'll also tell them that there's something much more compelling about church, much more meaningful than coffee hour and potluck fellowship. I'll tell them that when we respond to the bell, we're doing it because our deep desire to be in personal communion with God is completed in our communion with one another. Jesus taught his disciples to pray, "Our Father," not "my Father." I'll remind them of that. And even though they may often feel a deep longing for physical solitude, a wilderness of the spirit, away from the chatter of voices, they need to come back home and celebrate with a party, sharing a banquet where thousands of grains of wheat are gathered to form one loaf of bread. That's what I need to tell the drifters. And maybe I'll even climb up those old wooden steps, round and round and round, until I reach the top of the tower. Then I could ring the bell, call out to people below, "Hurry, it's time to come home. We're having a party." I hope there will be a Mr. Jones to help me. Looking forward to seeing everyone in church, either here in person or online. We love you all. Hear the bell.